Hello there guys, it's Joey, and today's video I'm going to talk about the elements of air, fire and water and talk a little bit about a different perspective on them. And this was kind of inspired because I had a custom order request through the store for 4 pillars for each of the elements, which I'll be showing in this video for the lady who pre-ordered them, and at the end I will cut the video and we'll have a close look at those at the very end of the video so you get a good shot. But I wanted to talk about these in depth because I thought it's a really interesting thing, to me anyway, how we are sort of trained in books and from how we learn, and the sort of stereotypical correspondences of which elements belong with each colour or each scent, and how that gets very much entrenched. And I was thinking to myself, and I actually asked when the lady asked, I was like, do you want the traditional colours or can I just, you know, do what I feel? And she was like, oh no, do what you feel. And I was like, yes. I've always been argumentative with literature, by which I mean that if I'm told there's a very, very strict way to do something, I'm like, well, why? And I was like this in sort of an academic sense, and that's why I did well at academics. And I'm like this with a lot of the spiritual literature as well. And it's, for example, in pulling into elemental, it's the watchtowers, and that kind of corresponds to the elements as well. And I was, you know, when you're reading and you're always taught to do the watchtowers, they're supposed to be towers or and I was like, no, I don't want to do it like that. And I was actually part of a forum at the time, and someone had actually brought up, oh, what do you use to represent the watchtowers when you're circle casting? And if you're confused about what I mean, when you cast a circle, a full circle, a magical circle, it is well known, if not traditional, to call the 4 quarters, and north, south, east and west, and to have the guardians of the watchtowers, if you like. It always makes me think of the Craft. I call to the guardians of the watchtowers of the north by the powers of earth. Yes, sorry, right. And in like a lot of the Wiccan books particularly, there's a very sort of strict idea of how they should visually look. And at the time I was part of a forum, and I answered this and I was like, well, I've always thought it made more sense to use trees. Like have a particular tree in each corner, and this is just something that I did naturally. This is not something I was ever taught to do, and I was doing this way before I realised that my path was Celtic, and then it became to open up and make more sense. And I was always using a grove aesthetic with a river running through, as it happens, way before I knew about the sacred grove and code from the Ogham, and that being a very particular Celtic sacred space. So in the very beginning I had a pine for earth, and sometimes I would have it sort of naturally decorated as if it was Christmas, more along the sense of having like pine cones on strings and more natural decorations rather than the glaring lights. And then I would have a cherry blossom for air, and a great big oak usually for fire for south, and in the west would be a weeping willow. So I had very, very defined ideas about what I thought each element kind of brought to bear, and I was thinking about this in terms of creating these candles, in terms of colour correspondence, and sort of why we stick to things that we're sort of taught, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us, if it doesn't sort of resonate with us, if it doesn't open up our imagination. And the one that I think for me caused me the most trouble when I was embarking on learning from Wiccan books in particular very early on. I'm not Wiccan, by the way. I have a lot of respect for Wicca, and I think it opens a lot of doors, but was air. And I was like, why is air this crayon box colour yellow? I'm not a big fan of yellow. I can kind of get along with it if I kind of shift and find it in nature. But for air to be this bright yellow, and people are like, well, I don't know, the sun, and I'm like, well, the sun's more fire surely, and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't, you know, speak to me on such a level. So when I was creating a candle for air, this is how it came out. I don't know how well it's going to show on the camera until I zoom in, and it's basically a white candle with a very light-filled shimmer. And I was thinking to myself about how much white there actually is with regards to air. And I tend to think of air as being a theatre. Air is one of my favourite and sort of aesthetics in terms of the sky. I look up at the sky at different times and think how incredible is the sky when you really look at it, and you spend some time really thinking about the theatre of sky and how it changes colour, it changes temperament, it changes tempo. Sometimes it's very cool and calm, and you know, you've got white fluffy clouds and it's all very breezy. And then you have your thunderstorms with your big black thick clouds and your crackling lightning and your crashing thunder, and it's all very, very exciting, very empowering. And then you have your dawn with your uplifting, full of light energy. And then you have twilight and dusk and sunset, which are my favourite time of day, with a huge crescendo of colours of purples and oranges, and yes, a little bit of yellow maybe, but it's more pinks and purples at dusk time, which really sort of uplifts my soul. And whereas you can make arguments for certain types of weather being more to do with other elements, you know, oh well, rain is more to do with water, I think that the theatre, the stage, is more about the air. And so if I'd have thought back then that, you know, you can reject this crayon box yellow because that doesn't fit with a natural feeling of what air is to me as an element, then perhaps that would have helped me out a little bit. And I was thinking about how, you know, how we all really do tend to enjoy the elements no matter what path we're on. It is something that a lot of us tend to adopt. We do have these, you know, these chants and rhymes which come very naturally. The earth, the air, the fire, the water, return, 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 return. Not like that. I can't sing right now because I'm a bit croaky, but they all mean something to us, and we all sort of incorporate them into our spell work quite a lot. We sort of use them as the pillars of creation, if you like. And I've always felt very, very drawn to elemental magic. I love it. I love the earth, air, fire and water. I think it's a wonderful categorization. It's a wonderful embracing of natural elements. So things we can touch, you know, things we can feel and see and sense in varying degrees depending on which element we're talking about. So there's something very real about those building blocks of magic. So then when I came onto fire, for example, fire is usually a red, but given that air was a white, I decided to go with a black, and it has a very, very copper and flame-on sheen. And it kind of reminds me of embers, of the dying embers of a fire, and then you've got your black for your ash and your charcoal and things like that, but you've still got fire moving through. And I was thinking about particularly for fire, how you don't often hear about black being associated with perhaps a fiery standpoint, but you think about how most things that burn end up charcoaly black, they end up crispy. That's the sort of natural life cycle of fire, and it's very empowering really when you think about it, because volcanic ash and things can be getting in to the soil, can be some of the most fertile soil that there is, following a great big catastrophe of volcanic nature, of course. So it's very, very interesting about this sort of readdressing colours in terms of the natural world is what I was looking at. The other two are a little bit more usual perhaps, but I'll show you those in a minute. But I was really loving the idea of a challenging colour in particular with regards to the element, and how there's so much black involved in flames. Like, yes, you have your flames at the beginning and they can look red and orange and yellow when they're burning, depending of course on your flame. You can get blue flames, you know, you can get all sorts of coloured flames, but the end result of flames is very, very often black. And so there's that kind of natural end to a fire cycle that all flames kind of embody and come to that point. And I really, really liked that idea of that fire being transformative, that ash, that smoke as well, being very, very dark, and it not just being about red means stop and danger and things, you know, it being a little bit more in the natural world. So I really quite enjoyed this kind of challenging what kind of elements I was thinking about. So earth is dark green, very dark green. Maybe because I felt that was a little bit more of a nature of a tree colour, and then got a little bit of an earth vibe going on through the top. Earthy greens. I'm making my peace with green, I'm trying to, and this is more of a personal thing. My mother surrounded the house in so much green, like dark green, everything, and I hated it. But what I have come to learn through Lessons of the Earth is to redress that and find colours in nature which uplift. I mean, I love trees and leaves and trees in particular though, herbs and things as well of course, but trees are the guardians of the world even. I think trees are the most beautiful magic there is, and green is just a natural part of them. I could have gone with a brown, but I didn't think the brown would fit within the conducive colours to all of them, so the four match quite well at the minute. And then we have water. So water is a almost lagoony blue. I don't know how well it comes out on camera, I can never tell until the rendering's done. And then I really, really love the top of the water. It's come out very lagoony, very... And lagoons are some of my absolute favourite water to look at. It's perhaps not as turquoise as some of the lagoons, even though the top bit kind of is. I think lagoons are these incredibly potent, incredibly beautiful, very exotic to my mind, because you don't find them in England, bodies of water. You can get lakes and things, but you know, and lagoons are just this sort of turquoisey gorgeousness. I love turquoise, it's my favourite. And I really wanted water to be in between the different kinds of water, because obviously you get often your pillar block blue, and that's more sea-like. Although if I'd have gone for more sea-like, I would have put a bit more white in, because I think you can get that away with your colours of white in the ocean with your foam and your, you know, the white horses. It always makes me think of the Guinness advert with tick follows top follows tick follows top, with the horses that are racing over the top of the water, and being about time. And despite it being an advert for alcohol, it's one of a really impactful adverts. It's very artistic, it's quite beautiful. I think it won awards actually, if you don't know what I mean. Guinness, white horses, tick follows tock. It's a beautiful aesthetic of time and horses going over the waves. It's beautiful. And it's interesting to me to really sort of reevaluate how we kind of tend to then look at elements such as water and look at the colours that what we're doing, and look at how we've kind of been taught these things and tend to say, is this something which is adding to my path and my understanding of the elements, or does it kind of hold me back from embracing how I perceive the world? And I think a lot of witchcraft and paganism kind of hinges on the understanding that we personally have for the natural world around us. So if something is kind of holding us back a little bit from really fully embracing and engaging with the elements, I think then we kind of have to reevaluate our stance on it. So just because we read that the colour yellow represents air in a book doesn't mean necessarily that we have to stick to that like gospel, because it kind of goes against how I feel that witchcraft should be, which is kind of an evolutionary process. And because it's something that we do and we engage in, if something isn't clicking with our understanding and the way that we want to interact in a very tactile way with the world around us, if this kind of becomes a block rather than a tool, rather than a craft, rather than an aid, it's kind of standing in the way of our magic, our witchcraft, embracing the elements and how we perform magic at the end of the day, because we use these elements, we bring these elements together, we use them to represent a whole host of different things. And if we're not fully engaging with that, then it sort of puts a little bit of a blockage in our way. And that's something I've been thinking about a little bit more recently as well, how we should naturally flow with our magic. And when we get kind of too bogged down by certain things, by certain details, by certain problematic elements, rather than just allowing things to flow, then surely the energy of who we are and the energy of our magic gets blocked as well. And I just was thinking how colour correspondence is one of those things which can be seemingly a simple and just accepted part of magic that perhaps we should look at and should just challenge a little bit, maybe. Right, so that's it for this video, and apart from the fact that I will, after I've talked, do a quick show of the end for a quick close-up, and that's it. Okay, many blessings. Okie dokie, I said I would do a quick close-up for the lady who purchased the pillars at the end, so I just want to, there we go, for water, for earth, for fire, and then for air. Many blessings.